From fabulous Las Vegas, PartyPoker.net presents Powerful Poker Profits, starring Vegas Vic himself, Victor H. Royer. And now, here's Vegas Vic.
Hello and welcome to our show. In this episode, we will concentrate on Limit and Pot Limit Omaha High. Both games are played to the same rules and with the same dealing procedures. However, in the Limit game, your betting sequences are structured, while in the Pot Limit game, your betting limits are fluid all the way up to the amount of the pot. This makes these two games significantly different. To find out all about it, let's go to the table. Playing Pot Limit Omaha High is similar to Pot Limit Texas Hold'em inasmuch as the betting and raising procedures are identical. Outside of this, however, there is little similarity. Both Omaha High Only and Omaha 8 are games most often played either as Limit or Pot Limit. Nevertheless, any Limit Omaha game is often extremely volatile. Therefore, Limit Omaha games are often contested amongst many players, and the winner is mostly decided in multi-way showdowns. The exact opposite is often the case in Pot Limit Omaha. Pot Limit games allow you to properly structure your wagering in a way in which you can either exploit what is called sweetening the pot by making smaller bets, often in early positions, to increase the value and pot odds that this hand will provide you, as well as to maneuver your opponents into situations where a large pot-sized bet will win the pot for you without having to go to showdown. In Limit games, therefore, your strategy begins with stringent starting hand requirements and careful observations of the texture of each flop, turn, and river in order to continuously evaluate the strength of your hand. Consequently, the mathematics of the game are far more important in limit structures. In Pot Limit Omaha, your strategy begins not only with strong starting hand standards, as well as continuously evaluating the texture of the flop relative to your hand and those of your opponents, but in particular in pot manipulation and observation of your opponents and their actions. In Limit games, you will most likely have to have the best hand to win at the showdown. In Pot Limit games, you are likely to win more often after the flop or after the turn and before a showdown. And if there is a showdown in Pot Limit Omaha, it will generally be only between you and your opponent and only very infrequently against two or more opponents. Therefore, playing Pot Limit Omaha is far more preferable to the limit structured games. One of the biggest problems that players in Omaha have is in the case of two-pair hands. There are two ways that you can make two-pair in Omaha High. You can make a two-pair hand by having a pocket pair and then having a pair on the board. This is not nearly as good as it appears and not nearly as good as it would be for Texas Hold'em. This is because if there is a pair on the board and you do not have a full house, chances are that somebody does, or that somebody else will make a better full house than you, or that somebody else already has a better hand than you can possibly make. Instead, the best way that you want to make two pairs in Omaha High is by matching two of your whole cards with two cards on the board. Another problem facing players of Omaha High is in overvaluing and overplaying medium and small sets. In Texas Hold'em, whenever you make a set, a three of a kind, that is usually a very good and strong hand. Not so in Omaha. If you don't have the top set, that means that you're always vulnerable to that very same hand that somebody else may actually have. Therefore, to improve your strategic success, you should always play middle and bottom sets much more carefully in Omaha than you would play them in Hold'em. Consequently, Pot Limit Omaha games are not only situationally dependent, but your success is directly influenced by your ability to assess the situation and in particular analyze your opponents and their potential strengths and weaknesses. Another problem faced by players who first learned Hold'em are flushes and straights. While in Limit Omaha, you can often play flush draws and straight draws because the pot odds will make it correct to do so. In Pot Limit Omaha, playing these very same hands under the identical circumstances is highly inadvisable. The reason for this is again economical because the situation is not completely reversed. In pot limit games, the value of these hands is very often negated by the simple fact that the pots are usually aggressively played either prior to the flop but mostly on the flop itself. Consequently, playing your draws past the flop can very easily cost you the entire playing stake without any assurance that the draw will actually get there. And there is also the danger that if it does get there, it may not be the winning hand. And therein lies the greatest difference between limit and pot limit Omaha. The limit game provides value for drawing hands, while the pot limit game provides value for made hands. To help you play Omaha High, I will now offer you a series of helpful hints that can be applied equally well to any limit as well as pot limit game. First, don't be afraid of scary cards. If you've made it to the flop or past the flop, don't automatically back down just because you see what you consider to be a dangerous board. Just because this board or this card appear to you to be scary, this doesn't mean that it will not be equally as frightening to your opponents. You should, however, be very afraid of a pre-flop raise. In pot limit Omaha, if a player makes a pre-flop raise, especially if this is a player in early or middle position, such a player almost always has very big cards and probably a big pair, which is usually also double suited. Another key piece of advice for Omaha is this: if you don't begin with the nuts, be sure you're drawing to it. This is something that applies mostly to hands in which you have several opponents. However, don't get in the habit of always folding just because it looks like you might be beat. Although it is important for you to consider folding, don't automatically do this each and every time. Your analysis of the texture of the flop and the turn relative to your classification of your opponents will help to successfully make these determinations. Don't bluff in limit Omaha. In any limit game, bluffing is generally a losing play. However, in pot limit Omaha, you can often get away with a pure bluff or a semi-bluff. In order to do so, you should always make such a play in conjunction with board cards that can support such a bluff. If you think you have a good drawing hand, bet it aggressively. Showing weakness is a mistake in any poker game, and particularly very costly in pot limit Omaha. Whenever you make this decision, don't make it meekly. If you decide to bet, then be ready to bet the pot. In pot limit Omaha, it is almost never correct to bet less than the pot. Unless you're trying to trap your opponents, you should always bet the full size of the pot. Most of the time, in any Omaha game, your opponents will always be on some kind of a draw, and only very infrequently on any kind of a made hand, and almost never on the pure nuts. Unless it is obvious that someone did flop the absolute nuts, if you choose to make a bet, you should always bet the pot. However, if someone else bets, then be wary. Just as when you bet, your opponents take it as an indication of strength, if somebody else does the same thing, this should be an indication of strength to you. Therefore, unless you hold the pure nuts, or at least the best possible multi-way draw to the pure nuts, fold and save your money. As simple as this seems, the vast majority of Omaha players will simply not understand this, and often even if they do understand it and know it very well, they will not do so. This is why Omaha players often lose when they could have been winning players. Don't fall in love with pocket aces or big pocket pairs. This is again a mistake often made by players who have first learned to play Texas Hold'em. Simply put, big pocket pairs in Omaha almost never win unimproved. Just as with big pocket pairs, don't fall in love with open-ended straight draws and flush draws. These are dangerous hands because you can very easily get there only to discover that you have the second or third best hand. This is particularly critical for pot limit Omaha because chasing such hands can easily cost you more than you will win by doing so. And finally, the best strategic advice I can offer you is to never play Omaha in limit structures. If you're going to play this game at all, confine your play to pot limit games and in particular to tournaments. The reason why playing pot limit Omaha in tournaments is so much preferable is because there you can risk only the amount of your tournament buy-in. However, if you play pot limit Omaha as a cash game, you can very often lose a great deal of money unless you become one of those very few expert players who can command serious income from high-stakes pot limit Omaha games. For most players, experiencing pot limit Omaha is best left to tournaments. Among the many great aspects of playing Omaha is the wonderful diversity that you will experience not only in your hand selections but with the strategies you employ as you proceed through the various rounds of play. in Limit Omaha High, you can very often take a few chances with marginal and drawing hands because you know that you are limited by the structure of the game to only that sequence of bets. This therefore somewhat mitigates your risk. In the pot limit game, you can often use the skills of pot manipulation precisely in order to prevent other players from taking a shot at the pot with marginal hands. These are perhaps the two most striking differences in these two types of the same game. As always, we hope you have enjoyed our program, and until next time, remember to play smart and play to win. I'm Victor H. Royer, and this has been a presentation of PartyPoker.net. Bye.
This has been a presentation of MRM Entertainment Inc. in association with Nevada Production Studios and PartyPoker.net.